filmed at the Harvest Festival in Waterford City. On this episode, Tor McIntosh chats with Rory O'Boyle of Go Vegan World. They talk about his journey to becoming vegan and how difficult it is to speak about it to some people in his life who don't understand his choice. How it takes a change of mindset and overcoming bias to become vegan, and the difference between plant-based diets and veganism, and how being vegan is not a diet. He views it as a way of living and a social justice issue. He also talked to Tor about his work with Eden Farmed Animal Sanctuary in Meath and Go Vegan World. Before we get stuck into this conversation, I have a couple of asks for you. First of all, please do follow this series on Apple and Spotify. Share it with your friends and really help us to spread the word about this podcast. We also have a new TV series called Food Matters, which is available on the RTE player, and you can also check out the episodes and loads more information on the website foodmatterstv.ie. So now let's get to Tor and Rory. He kicks off his conversation by telling Tor a little more about himself, his work, and what led him to choose the vegan way of life.
Well, I met my girlfriend in 2012. She was already vegan. So you could say it was a slow transition from 2012 to 2014. In reality, up until that point, I had never been exposed to the concept. It was out there. It wasn't in my circle of friends. It wasn't anyone I knew was even vegetarian or even, in any position to address it with me. So I suppose you could say, while we've had the internet for 25 years, in reality, I chose not to. It's an area I chose not to engage in. And then, so I met my girlfriend we started going out in 2012, and yeah, at that, there was no trigger point, I think. We talked about it every so often when it came up in terms of food, because that's where it manifests itself most in terms of our interaction with other animals, and food seems to be a sticking point. Cheese, for some reason, seems to be something that people will die for. And then there's also the thing, well, I tried a vegan cheese and I didn't like it, so that's that. It's a bit like, I don't drink alcohol because I didn't like Guinness, so that's it. So there is this perception that, well, I've tried it once and that's it. If you change your mindset, that makes everything else a lot more straightforward, because you're doing it for altruistic reasons. You're not doing it for yourself.
Rory O'Boyle is an animal rights activist, a proponent of plant-based and vegan diets, and a team member at the Eden Farmed Animal Sanctuary in County Meath. And I'm delighted to welcome him as our special guest on this episode of Food Done Right. Hi, I'm Mick Kelly, founder of GIY, and this is season 2 of our podcast series Food Done Right, which was...
I had the same kind of old hypothetical situations that I would talk about as to why we couldn't do X, Y or Z. And I think then around Christmas 2013, I kind of got to the point where I said, look, I've no arguments against you, but I don't know if I said the words, but I just don't care. And then something early in the new year, there was just something I said, well, if I'm not consistent, if I want to speak up on anything and say that, well, it matters. Well, you can't say something matters and then say, well, this matters, but I don't care about other matters. So I went vegan early in the year. There was no phase to it. I'm kind of embarrassed in a way that the last time I ate meat was at my grand aunt's house, where she had prepared. Now, she knew my girlfriend was vegan, so it was only for me, but she'd gone out and got fancy bacon or something, and I was, rather than upsetting her or putting her off, I sat down and ate it. And just, before that point, since that point, I would always try to, address it with people so that it wouldn't make them uncomfortable. But it's just something you learn to just get accustomed to, and then it once it becomes a regularity, it doesn't really, impact on you anymore.
And it can be sometimes quite difficult to speak to people and explain, like, being vegan, if there is a cultural understanding when meat has just been so part of the daily diet. Did you find that at all with any of your family or maybe the older generation, or even still now with people your age who can't quite understand that you don't have any animal products in your diet?
Yeah, I'm the only member of my family. I have 4 siblings. I'm the only member of my family that's gone vegan. And as a family, my mother, when I'm at home, she asks that we don't talk about it.
Really?
Because it's upsetting for people. I hope she's not listening to this podcast. But that's the way it's gone. It's this thing about, well, we don't do things that other people do.
Yeah.
And I think the principle is, it doesn't matter how you commodify someone. What matters is that you view them as an item of consumption. So yeah, I haven't yet found the way that if someone's disinterested or just doesn't want to discuss it, I haven't found a way to integrate it into a conversation. Yeah. I mean, there's things like the campaign, there's the retired Garda. He has a dog that bit a woman, and now the dog is to be put down because of it. And there's been what do you call it? What the names are being collected, whatever.
Yeah, they're like petition.
Sorry, that's the word I was thinking of. Yeah. For people to try to save the dog.
The dog.
That is this man's companion. Yeah. So people do get certain issues of it, and it motivates them to do certain things, but I suppose it doesn't change their own day-to-day behaviour, so it's a bit easier to separate your own activities from the activities of others.
Absolutely.
But more directly back to your question, I haven't yet found the magic touch of getting people to just engage. There is that thing about, well, we don't do what other people do, but it's just enough to view them as separate from their other animals, but we don't see ourselves as animals in the first place.
Yeah, and do you think that lack of understanding and of what veganism is because, like, the why would you not want to bring animal products into your diet? That's why people can't understand your decisions for your diet and your lifestyle. Do you think there's some sort of gap in understanding, or it's more like we don't really want to know and we find it a very strange thing that you're wanting to do because we're accustomed to having milk in the fridge, meat in their cheese? What's just from your personal experience, do you feel that there's that kind of disconnect between understanding?
Yeah, a big part of it is the strangeness, the perception that it's strange to not do something, and I don't know, you get to a point in the conversation where then they're talking about the desert island and what will you do on a desert island. So we're not talking about our surroundings or our reality, we're talking about hypotheticals. And then, well, that's a difficult situation to talk about. I don't know what I would do if I won the lottery. I don't know what I would do, but that's no reason not to talk about the reality of where we are. So I don't know if, I think people just don't choose not to engage. There is that side of things where people say, oh, veganism, that's a diet. And obviously anyone that is vegan would retort to say that it's a way of living. It's a social justice issue. People see social justice issues as something that politicians talk about. So it's the wide scale use of other animals. It's just seen as so normalised that people would never give it any thought.
Yeah, and that really comes into your work with Go Vegan World and what they are advocating and hoping to do, and what's like you're working with them and what Sandra does. Give us an overview of what the mission is through Go Vegan World and what you hope to do through your advocacy and there.
Yeah, so Go Vegan World it's consistently advocating for the rights of animals and asking people to go vegan. So it's a very basic pillar to base a campaign on. Now it is construed that only certain people can do it, and only and that's an argument that people make. Is that
a financial thing? Is that what people think, or
to me it's a bad faith argument.
Really?
There is the thing when we talk about people making change for the environment, whatever. Adopting a plant-based diet costs you, presuming you want to continue eating, a plant-based diet costs you nothing because you're going to be buying food. So the biggest manifestation of being vegan is the change in bias to other animals, but how it manifests itself is what we consume every day. So I don't think it's an economic argument for people. It is just change, and people are naturally resistant to change. It's if people are approachable with the topic in the first place, it obviously makes the conversation easier. It's when people are resistant before you start, that is a wall to break down. And that's different. Obviously every person's different, and that does tend to be different, where their starting point is. So yeah, there is, it can be difficult in certain ways in that we're so used to the way things are done already. I mean, people would often say about, I don't want my makeup to be tested on animals. And they seem to be able to make that connection. or there's other areas of their life that, you know, they see they'll be able to change or be able to, you know, adopt brands that don't involve animal products. Food seems to be a sticking point. Cheese, for some reason, seems to be something that people, you know, will die for.
It's like the bacon for the vegetarian, like for the vegan, it's the cheese.
It's this thing about that, you know, and then there's also the thing, well, I tried a vegan cheese and I didn't like it, so that's that.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit like, I don't drink alcohol because I didn't like Guinness, so that's it.
Yeah.
You know, so there is this perception that, well, I've tried it once and that's it. And it is, if you change your mindset, then what follows, the mindset change is the step to make that makes everything else a lot more straightforward, because you're not doing it for, you're doing it for altruistic reasons. You're not doing it for yourself. It's not something your social media content will, you know, improve because of you're doing certain things. It can improve your health, but it may not improve your health. You know, if you don't adopt a balanced diet, whatever you consume, you know, it's not going to make you more or less healthy. You need a balanced diet wherever you start from, but none of that necessitates the consumption of other animals. And so if you change your mindset, then what you look out for is a lot more straightforward, because it's just.
And would you say, I remember distinctly meeting my first vegan. I worked with her and she'd spent her entire life as a vegan, and this, we're talking 20 years ago I first met her, and I look back then at actually how difficult it probably was to be a vegan, because there wasn't so much availability of you know, options to, if you wanted to have an alternative diet. Would you say that it is easier to become a vegan now, but it's become more controversial to perhaps be a vegan now because of certain things like trying to come up with alternative meat products, which suddenly you start talking about them being actually not that healthy? Is just maybe explore that a little bit, because I know it's a huge subject, but really to get your views on really the plant-based food industry there. It's so much more available in our supermarkets, but are those products the right products that we are being sold as vegan foods?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot in that.
Yeah, huge, massive question.
Obviously, for someone that wants to be vegan, the availability of food products that don't contain animals, definitely the range has improved. The availability has improved. You know, the coffee shops, there used to be a time where you'd have to ask, have you got oat milk or whatever? Now you can ask what type of milk you want. Can I say,
I was told off when I asked for normal milk by someone, and they're like, is that dairy milk? And I was like, okay, yeah, I've totally been told off there.
So the availability is certainly changed. In terms of, you know, alternative meats and that, the target audience for those are people that are, say, in inverted commas, curious. I don't think vegans consume the most of the, I know there's the two American, the Impossible Burger and is it Beyond Meat?
Beyond Meat, yeah, absolutely.
But I don't think the majority of those are consumed by vegans. So there is that thing about
it's the vegan curious, the ones.
Exactly. So that step, again, so it's going back to maybe what I said before, the change of bias, the change of mindset means that it's easier once you've changed your mindset, but it's made easier by the range of what's available out there. It does come back to that thing, a bag of chips can be vegan, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy. So, you know, what you consume is a choice that we make, but it should be underpinned by something. And for a vegan, that is that we look at other animals as not for consumption by ourselves. We need to share the world with them. It's their world as much as it is ours. So we shouldn't be looking at them as part of something that we need to consume for our own palate pleasure or something like that. So yeah, so the availability has improved. It should make it easier for people to live day to day as vegans. There is a health argument about some of the products that are out there, but I think junk food is junk food regardless of its ingredients, and that's why it's categorized as such. So there is that side of things where we can all become a bit too lazy, and if you eat a lot of junk food and you're not getting a balanced diet, you're not going to be healthy, whatever the makeup of your diet is.
And just off the back of that, it's that whole, just using that term plant-based, which, you know, in many ways is a very good term to use for something that is essentially, it's a plant-based food. But that word, that term has really got connotations now with potentially not very healthy food, because they call it the first wave of these plant-based like foods that are available, which if you read the ingredients on the back, you need a science degree to understand what's in there. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that word, and if there is, do you use that word, or are you more a plant forward, a plant centric, and how, even through your campaigning and advocacy that you do, what you use?
Well, I suppose plant-based, as we use it, is interpreted as a diet, a consumption pattern that excludes anything derived from animals. So it makes things simple. In terms of once you have a plant-based diet, what you eat does come down to yourself. But that can be very much fruit and vegetables is probably the genesis of a plant-based diet. So where you go to from beyond that point, people that go vegan, they don't necessarily do it because of the taste of what they used to eat. So they do sometimes look to go back to the textures and the taste that they had before. And people that I suppose are resistant to going vegan will say, oh, it doesn't taste the same. And it's that thing of back to, well, I've tried it once, I've tried one thing, and that's it, I'm done, I know what I know. So plant-based is an easy way of describing something that is a consumption pattern, but it isn't veganism being the ethical stance. So they are separate. They're used interchangeably a lot of the time, even by vegans, because sometimes vegan is 2 syllables. Plant-based diet, it's 4. So even as a point of laziness, they are used interchangeably. But generally, people will, when they're talking seriously about the issue, do try to separate the two.
Yes.
And I don't think necessarily the connotation that a plant-based diet is unhealthy. It may be more healthy, it may not, but I don't think it would be any less healthy.
I think it's a shame. It is in many ways in those early days of where like veganism really came into the media, it became hijacked, and then it took this kind of, you started to hear the stories about, well, it's not exactly a healthy diet, and it was just a shame that term then got associated with an unhealthy diet, or in some ways
I don't see it that way. I haven't seen it as, not saying that you're being stark, but I haven't seen it as drawn in that direction. To be fair, now it is, people do use it and say, well, I'm mostly plant-based, but mostly plant-based isn't plant-based. It is that thing about I'm mostly vegan, I'm mostly something. You either are something or you're not. It's a binary position. You either are or you aren't. So people say a mostly plant-based diet or mostly vegan. To me, it doesn't make sense. You are vegans definitely make a point of this Meatless Monday. It might be something that people try, but ethically, if on a Monday you do something that you think is right and the other 6 days of the week you don't, then you're kind of in a position of going, well, what happens in those 6 days? How do you move away? So that's why you get back to the ethical position, that if you're ethically consistent, you, I think like myself, you kind of go from a position of acceptance fairly quickly. People say, well, for some people it's a journey, but every day of that journey, while you're using other animals, is another day where another animal gets used. And for some people that journey never ends. They're at it for years and decades. So I don't think the genuine motivation there is to reach veganism. It's just something that they want to be comforted by saying they're on the road to something. But I think you have to get to that point fairly quickly if you accept it.
But possibly a nice gateway into it. We talked about the the Impossible Burgers being for those who are slightly curious about possibly, and maybe those meat-free Mondays is another tool that can be used if people want to say, I like the idea of the vegan lifestyle, but it is a habit change. We talked about that earlier, and it can be quite intimidating if you're so used to meat and dairy and cheese all just being in your diet from childhood. Do you see it as maybe a nice way of transitioning into it, or do you see it really as just it's too slow? You need to make the changes now, or you just are always going to be in that grey zone of. So
one of the slogans that the campaign has used before is that going vegan is easy when you know why. If you accept the ethical argument, then how you get there is a decision you have to make for yourself. And yeah, so having plant-based alternatives, if it makes it easier for people, so be it. They need to obviously address their own nutritional needs when it comes to food and whatever, and maybe it does help them, and it might be a springboard for some people, and in that regard it's no harm. But the ethical argument always needs to be made, because some people do adopt a plant-based diet for health reasons, in terms of cholesterol, whatever they may have a nutritional or a health reason for it, but often you'll find they'll drift away from it when they find that they haven't made the moral connection with other animals, so they can drift away. So having it there is great if it helps people, but it doesn't necessarily underpin their value judgments.
Yeah, so I hear that as like the core of your lifestyle change, like, needs to be coming from that animal rights beliefs and understandings in order for it to become a long-term lifestyle.
Yeah, I think for a lifetime sustainment, I think you need more than something you saw on social media.
Yes.
Or I remember when kale became a hipster. Now kale, to anybody that doesn't know, kale is cabbage.
Yeah.
It is branded as something hipster. It's just cabbage, but it's been well branded.
Very well branded.
So things like that there come and go from time to time. The kale, the roast kale, I made it myself a couple of times. It's very straightforward and whatever. But these things come and go, and I think the only way for people to be able, not necessarily to be able to, but the one way of ensuring that their convictions stick is that they're doing it not for themselves, but as an ethical judgment of the world around us.
And kind of coming back to you, and also wanting to know a little bit more about the sanctuary. That really was, if you were working at the sanctuary before you then became vegan, was the other way around?
Oh no, it was the other way around.
So very much it was vegan, and then that brought you into working with the animal sanctuary.
Yeah.
And what brought you to the sanctuary? And tell us a little bit more about the sanctuary, like the Eden Farmed Animal Sanctuary.
So Eden it's out in Meath. It's got, I wanted to do a head count before, but it's over 200 animals.
Wow.
And they're all rescued from the animal industries. And in terms of my involvement, it's something that I came up in and I'm engaging with Sandra at the early days of the pandemic. It's not my background in terms of I would describe myself as a full-time carer, but when you hear those words, people always thinking that's that human-centric thing of thinking, carer, or you work in a nursing home or with someone with special needs. In our case, it's animals that do have special needs because they were bred for our use. They have the same kind of skeletal or health problems that comes about because of their breeding for the purposes that which they were brought into this world. One thing, and I'm sure Sandra won't mind me saying this, is one thing that I didn't appreciate was when I was there in the first days, I asked, why weren't there visitors? Why aren't people seeing these animals? And I suppose my mindset hadn't gotten around to what Sandra said, that these animals are survivors.
Yeah.
We wouldn't take human survivors of abuse or use and parade them as as so the animals are there to live their own lives. They're not there to be shown to the public as it's not a petting zoo. It's not animals being used for the purposes of human, I don't know if enjoyment, but human engagement. So working on the sanctuary doesn't mean you're not bringing in anyone to have a look around. These animals are there because they're fortunate enough to make it to the sanctuary, and they'll live out the remainder of their lives as comfortably as they can and in their own communities.
And I suppose that connection between the sanctuary and Go Vegan World, it just clarifies that underpinning of the animal rights beliefs linked to veganism and the changing of the lifestyle. So it feels natural for them both to come together.
The sanctuary without the campaign wouldn't make sense, because if you're not seeking to change the lives of other farmed animals, then all you're doing is taking a tiny percentage of the animals that were fortunate enough to make it to the sanctuary. But if you're not changing the lives of all the farmed animals, or at least attempting to do so, then you're really not going to make progress, because every year there will be other animals that come out of, in inverted commas, productive use in animal agriculture, and there's just never going to be anywhere for them all to go, where they're seen as not even economically usable in slaughterhouses. And going back to trying to people's understanding about veganism, and
What do you think still needs to be done in Ireland for a better understanding of the reasons, as the slogan, the reasons why? What would you say are some of the key things? Do we need to be starting talking a lot more about its link to the agriculture and climate change? Do we just need to be making it clear that you don't need to be buying meat alternatives, and we just need to be eating more wholesome plants, fruit, veggies? Is it a bit of everything? How would you sum it up as looking forward?
It's not easy to change a national mindset.
Yes.
So for certain people, they may always be resistant to the idea that other animals are rights bearers. But that's no reason not to try to get there. So, and then it does cross over with things like there's social justice issues for humans that are involved in animal agriculture. There are environmental concerns with animal agriculture. I suppose you can't make everyone think the same. So it is campaigning. There are grassroots organisations that campaign. The barriers to it effectively are the people in positions of power are uniformly resistant. To my mind, I don't think Ireland has ever elected someone to the Oireachtas that's vegan. There are people that are vegetarian who would say they see themselves as some, on the same kind of spectrum as, and that isn't anywhere in relation, because it's not consistently accepting the moral rights of other animals. So there are quite significant barriers to change, but that's no reason not to advocate for it in the first place. And that's what the campaigns like Go Vegan World attempt to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you come up against a lot of resistance around the views of Go Vegan World, and the possible might be seen as attacks on animal farming and agriculture, and is that a daily...
any coverage of the campaign that's in the news is invariably given is provided space for a spokesperson from animal agriculture to refute the arguments. So there's no doubt. And it can be difficult. I don't know how anyone could be involved in the campaign from day one and to still be advocating, but you do it because of your convictions. There is a lot of resistance.
That must be tiring, like just every day kind of battling that stance.
But I suppose the animals that are at the sanctuary do provide motivation, that you look at them and think, their lives matter to them, but they're a minute fraction of the animals that even exist in our own country that are used every day. I was doing stat research in terms of numbers, and the scale is massive, but even for every individual that's killed, other animals aren't homogeneous groups. So when we value or judge animals in terms of their weight, it's not even body count. It just shows you how separate we have become from their lives. So there is a lot of resistance to change, but resistance is as much among people that refuse. If you set aside the animal agriculture industry, it's from people that refuse to stop funding it. So you wouldn't criticize farmers for doing what they do because they see it as the economic basis on which they provide a livelihood, when people are willing to pay for what they produce. So in that regard, it's on all of us. It's not necessarily, but there will be resistance, because resistance to change is something that industries have fought their whole existence.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So there's lots that are, food for thought there in many ways, and just thinking of ways. And I think the thing that I've got out of this mostly is that reason, if you're going to make such significant change to your lifestyle, you need to have that core belief and reason for doing it. And just listening to you there is having, that belief in animal rights has really spurred you to become a vegan and lead a lifestyle that you have, and advocate for it as well. So, and
if I could just say, because it would be unbecoming of me if I didn't mention it, that anybody wants to know more, if you Google Go Vegan World, the website pops up. You can read as much or as little as you like. It's there to be read. It's there to be challenged if someone feels they need to challenge it. But I think once they engage on the issue, much as I wish I had done many years before, I think people will come round to, changing their way of life.
Yeah, and that's where hopefully it is easier than back when you changed 8 years ago. It's hopefully a little bit easier for people to make those decisions now, which is fantastic. So thank you ever so much, Rory, and it's really great to talk to you.
Thank you, Tor.
Huge thanks to Rory and Tor for such an interesting conversation. Thanks a million for listening, and please come back next time for the next episode of Food Done Right.